AFA variation designed to increase efficiency. Interview informed synthesize contingency. Experimental design that alternates conditions to verify effects. Reversal design. List of description of skills and the conditions under which they should be observed. Behavioral checklist. Synonymous with ABAB design, withdrawal design. Three-phase design that begins with treatment condition. BAB design. The subject's behavior is the result of exposure to the prior condition. Sequence effects. The type of sequence of the conditions in a study to draw conclusions. Experimental design. A pattern of responding with little variation. Steady state responding. Experimental control technique that uses NCR as a control. Non-contingent reinforcement reversal technique. Demonstration that prior baseline trends would remain if not for the independent variable. Verification. Experimental design with baseline intervention, ABAB design. A faulty explanation of behavior that assumes an inner cause. Mentalism. Repeating conditions to determine reliability. Replication. 5 different types of behavior. Verbal behavior. Elementary verbal operant. Direct observations of antecedent behavior. Consequence in the natural environment. Descriptive formal behavior assessment. Recording a descriptive, temporally sequenced account of behaviors, antecedents, and consequences. Anecdotal observation. Behavior change that has maximum impact on access reinforcers is habilitation. A single component invokes a non-matching intraverbal response. Sample verbal discrimination. Behavior whose reinforcement is mediated by a listener is verbal behavior. Experiment to determine the effects of different amounts of independent variables is a parametric study. A change in behavior is attributed to only the manipulated event. Functional relation. 2 interlocking levels of verbal behavior in one utterance is autoclitic. Experimental arrangements of antecedent consequences. Functional analysis. Recording the extent to which a behavior occurs more often at some time than others is scatterplot recording. Indirect procedures to identify and define the target behavior is behavioral assessment. Serving the same purpose is functionally equivalent. Verbal behavior where the listener is affected by a specific response topography for the is topography based. A behavior that exposes the learner to new environments is behavioral cusp. Likelihood for a target behavior will occur in each circumstance. Conditional probability. A response evoked by a written verbal SD with no formal similarity, but there is point-to-point correspondence is textual. A tact that occurs as a result of stimulus generalization is the tact extension. Demonstration of a functional relation between environmental variables and behaviors of functional analysis. Repeating conditions in an experiment to determine effects is replication. Experimental design with baseline intervention. Baseline is an ABA design. A single antecedent variable affects the strength of more than one response. Divergent multiple control. Interactions between a speaker and a listener is a verbal episode. Exchanging the reinforcement contingencies for 2 different responses. Contingency reversal. Objective observation of phenomena is empiricism. Higher order verbal cusp, combining speaker and listener repertoires. Bidirectional naming. Each session of the FA is terminated when problem behaviors occur. Latency-based functional analysis. A variation where baseline and intervention start and other legs are staggered. Delayed multiple baseline design. Only behavior likely to produce naturally occurring reinforcement should be targeted. Relevance of behavior rule. Using reversal logic to compare the effects of 2 or more conditions. Multiple treatment reversal design. The observation affecting the behavior being measured is reactivity. Natural science approach to the study of behavior. Experimental analysis of behavior. A philosophical approach that views behavioral events that cannot be observed as outside the realm of science. Methodological behaviorism. Data that is not trending upwards or downwards is stable baseline. Control comparison of the DV under the IV is experiment. Person who reinforces the speaker's behavior is a listener. A duplex where the form of a motor response is under the control of a visual verbal SD with formal similarity is motor imitation. Response evoked by a verbal SC with no point-to-point correspondence is an intraverbal. Someone who engages in verbal behavior is a speaker. The higher level of responding cannot be reproduced is irreversibility. A systematic approach to understanding of natural phenomena is science. Multiple baseline designs applied to different locations is multiple baselines across settings. Ruling out simple before moving to complex parsimony. Repeatedly implementing a condition to reduce extraneous variables. Study state strategy. Behaviorism that understands human behavior, including private events. Radical behaviorism that agree to satisfying generality. External validity. Antecedent and response share the same mode and resemble each other. Formal similarity. Multiple baseline designs apply to different participants. Multiple baselines across subjects. Two or more verbal SDs that each independently evoke behavior, but when combined evoke a specific response. Compound verbal discrimination. Verbal response is under the control of a verbal stimulus with point-to-point correspondence with no form of similarity. Codec. Experimental technique that demonstrates the effect of reinforcement. DRA reversal technique. Covert events accessible only to the person. Private events. Data points that do not consistently fall within a narrow range. Variable baseline. Defining behavior by shape or form. Topography phase definition. Members of a response class based on their common effect in the environment. Function-based definition. Behavior that produces covariation in other untrained behaviors. Pivotal behavior. Target behaviors are appropriate and intervention procedures are acceptable. Social validity. Continually questioning truth and validity of science. Philosophical doubt. Experimental design with changing successive criterion for reinforcement or punishment. Changing criterion design. Assessment that acknowledges complex interrelations between environment and behavior. Ecological assessment. Variation of a multiple baseline with intermittent checks. Multiple probe design. A hypothetical variable that falsely claims to explain the observed phenomena. Explanatory fiction. A discrimination in which verbal stimulus alters the function of another stimulus. Verbal conditional discrimination. A FA where conditions occur during naturally occurring opportunities. Trial-based analysis. The philosophy of the science of behaviors. Behaviorism. A spoken verbal stimulus that evokes a written type or fingerspelled response is taking dictation. Interviews, ratings, or questionnaires used to identify the maintaining reinforcer of problem behavior. Indirect functional assessment. Multiple baseline design applied to different behaviors of the same subject. Multiple baselines across behaviors. A response of any form evoked by an MO and followed by a specific reinforcer is a MAND. Written response evoked by a verbal SD, copying a text. A verbal SD evokes a specific nonverbal behavior, listener discrimination. A response evoked by a nonverbal discrimination stimulus, nonverbal discriminative stimulus, is attacked. Assumption that the world is lawful and orderly, determinism. Belief of integration to the maximum amount is normalization. Verbal behavior with formal similarity under the control of a verbal SD is duplex. Vocal response evoked by a vocal verbal SD with formal similarity is echoic. The truth of a statement depends on how effectively it guides action. Pragmatism. A single verbal response is the function of more than one variable. Convergent multiple control. A variety of experimental designs that use baseline logic. Single case design. AF variation design to increase efficiency. Interview informed synthesized contingency. Improvements based on opportunity to perform. Practice effect. Experimental design to compare two or more conditions. Multi-element design. 1 or 2 short sessions are conducted for each condition. Functional analysis.